That night, in the countryside of Ohio, was my first night shift at Oakridge Community Hospital, a place that had long been dysfunctional, unusable, and only kept open in certain sections for emergencies. And by the time the clock struck 3 a.m, I had begun to question why I had applied for such a low-paying security job and found myself in this vast, echoing labyrinth. I suppose I had no other choice, because I had been unemployed for a long time. My job seemed simple enough. Every hour, starting from the main entrance, I would tour the empty wards, dark operating rooms, and dusty waiting rooms, checking the door sensors with a tablet I held in my hand. My first 2 rounds were quiet, and nothing unusual occurred. There was only the noise of the ventilation system and the high-pitched sound of water dripping from a distant pipe. However, on the 3rd round, as I entered the hallway of the pediatric ward on the 2nd floor, my instincts reacted before I did, and somehow stopped me in my tracks. On the nurse's station at the end of the corridor, I saw a tablet. The screen of the tablet was flickering with a dim light, and when I approached, I realized that the device was not showing the live feed from the security cameras, but that someone had hacked into the hospital's closed circuit system and was looping a pixelated but very clear video showing the inside of a room about 50 meters behind the corridor where I was currently standing. In the footage, the door I had just passed was slowly opening, and a strange person whose face was completely hidden by a black mask was entering with a key in their hand, settling under the bed as if they had been hiding there for a while. My hands trembling, I put the tablet down, and at that moment, I realized that there was actually someone else in this building besides me. And furthermore, they were moving by watching me and anticipating my moves. My skin was crawling. As I tried to quickly return to the security room, I saw the door to the stairwell slowly closing from the other side just as I was about to pass through. When I pushed, it was locked, but a slight rhythmic tapping on the other side of the metal door was sharp enough to make me sure that someone was leaning against the door, listening to my breathing. I immediately called the center, but only static came through the walkie-talkie. Then, a message appeared on my phone from a number that I had no record of until that moment, which simply read, "Don't turn around and look back." When I heard that characteristic shuffling sound of hospital slippers on the polished floor coming from one of the corridors, I understood that I was no longer a security guard, just someone being hunted. As I tried to escape, I noticed that all the cameras of the parking lot exit I had just passed were showing a black screen. Someone had taken complete control of the system, and I was trapped inside that massive building. A trap where every corner was known by heart by a stranger. When I reached the exit door, I saw that the handle had been chained from the outside, and at that moment, I felt that the masked figure wasn't just there to hurt me, but was herding me around the hospital in places visible to the security cameras, a sort of real-time show. In a panic, I looked for an exit here and there. The windows on the ground floor had iron bars, so I immediately went up to the 2nd floor and managed to get out somehow by dangling myself from the window. Everything was silent when I reached my car in the parking lot. When the police arrived, they could not find any signs of forced entry at the hospital, or even a shred of evidence that anyone was inside. They only reported that all the security footage from the night I was on duty had been deleted from the system. Even though months have passed, when I try to sleep at night, I see my phone suddenly light up. No message arrives, no call is recorded. But the thought that the masked figure in the pixelated video I watched on the tablet in that hospital corridor that night might actually be standing at the foot of my bed right now watching the screen continues to gnaw at my mind like a parasite. You might think I am being paranoid, but whenever I pass by a hospital, I am so sure that someone is watching me every second that sometimes I really do lock eyes with someone. It was autumn last year, and I had been assigned to the night security shift at St. Jude Hospital. Working at night was not something I would ever do if I weren't forced to, but I had to, and I never imagined the job would become this claustrophobic. It was a very old structure on the outskirts of the city, now used only as a chronic care unit, famous for its labyrinthine corridors and elevators that were constantly breaking down. During the very first week of the job, especially while patrolling around the technical rooms in the basement, I thought the heavy, cold gaze I felt upon me was just a normal reflection of fatigue and my psychological reluctance to work the night shift. However, everything changed that Tuesday night while I was at the monitors. On one of the screens, in the corridor of the archive department where people rarely go, I noticed someone slowly pushing their wheelchair back and forth. The image was so blurry that the person's face couldn't be distinguished, but even the dusty yellowed shade of the hospital gown they were wearing was enough to make me shudder. When I made an announcement over the radio asking who it was, I only received a static noise. At that exact moment, a photo landed on my phone from an unknown number, showing someone standing right in the middle of that corridor, looking directly at the security camera. As my heart began to pound in my throat, I examined the screen more carefully. The person in the image wasn't moving, they were just watching. Then suddenly, all the lights in the area where the building's electrical panel was located went out at the same time. At that moment, all I could think of was to hide in the locker inside the room. When I grabbed my flashlight and stepped into the corridor, I saw a cup of coffee that had just been left on the floor, still warm. Yet no one had been on this floor for hours. Then, from afar, I heard footsteps that came in rhythm, as if someone were tracking my every move. When I turned around, there was no one there, but all the doors I had just passed were locked, and papers with the words "No Exit" written on them were taped to them. I only heard breathing over the radio. These breaths sounded as if they were coming from inside the building's ventilation system. I immediately ran to the security room and locked the door, but on the monitor I saw an image of my own back. The camera was inside the room, and I was being filmed by a device connected from outside the system. A message came to my phone again, this time containing only the coordinates of my location. At that moment, I realized I was just a part of a hunt. As I ran toward the stairs, I understood from the doorknobs moving slowly up and down that someone was waiting behind every door in the basement. When I reached the outer door, I saw it had been chained from the outside. And at that moment, an announcement I had recorded earlier began to play from the loudspeaker in the security room. Desperately, I broke one of the windows and threw myself outside. When I got into my car in the parking lot and hit the gas, I saw a light go on in a room on the top floor of the hospital in the rear view mirror, and a shadow leaning against the glass. I don't remember how I drove home. The next day, police teams raided the hospital, but there was no trace of anything. The archive department had been sealed for years, and there were only dusty shelves inside. Since that day, whenever I hear the sound of a doorknob turning slowly, and I get the feeling that the cameras in that hospital basement are still watching me live, and it's as if the figure in that wheelchair is waiting in the darkness for my next move. Whenever a notification hits my phone at night, I remember what I experienced that night, and it seems to prove that the time I spent in that hospital never truly ended.